1800 years ago, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi had a massive issue to wrestle with. He was leader of the Jewish people, and he had to figure out how to best ensure the preservation of Jewish wisdom from one generation to the next. Not a new dilemma. All of his predecessors had the same issue to wrestle with, and everybody afterwards would think about it too. But Rabbi Yehuda was particularly notable because he made a drastic and radical new decision. He took a set of ideas called the Oral Torah, and he wrote them all down. He made them written. And this was important not only because nobody had done it before, but also because it was actually against the rules. He was breaking with accepted custom that said, you know what? You're not supposed to write down any element of the oral tradition. And he went and wrote down the whole thing. And so why do I bring this up? Well, we're wrestling with an equally radical shift today. And it's not going to surprise anyone. It relates also to the way we access information and access Judaism. I'm talking about the internet. We're experiencing something just as radical as the shift that Rabbi Yehuda brought in his time. The way I'd like to look at it is actually as a sort of migration. I know that might sound a little strange, but just as we think about the internet as cyberspace, I think it actually makes sense to think of it as a new territory we're wandering into. It's an uncharted kind of location, and what that brings us is the ability to look to our Jewish past, to look to our past Jewish migrations as a way to learn about our Jewish present and our future. So let's do that. Let's start with the most ancient Jewish text we got, with our Torah, and let's flash to the wilderness, where we wandered around for quite some time. We find ourselves in the desert, and we have to make a big decision. We have to figure out, are we going to enter into this place called Canaan? So it's a big one. So we decide to send 12 leaders of the Jewish people, of the Israelites, to check it out and report back. 10 of them are pretty clear about what we should do. They say, don't do that. Don't go there. There are these big giants. We felt like little grasshoppers. Why would we go and take this incredible risk and enter into a territory we've never really seen before? I know our lives in the wilderness aren't so great. We've been wandering around for a while, but at least we have our lives. Two folks, Joshua and Caleb, they take a different tack. They say, you know what, we should give this new place a chance. And the reason they cite in this mythic narrative is they say, well, we've got this holy divine leader. We've got God who's going to take us in and who will lead the way. And that's a really important interpretation. I've got another one, which is that if you're trying to start a thriving civilization, it probably helps to be rooted in a spot. It probably helps to have a particular space that you can use as a sort of laboratory and get your people going. And that's what we do. Joshua and Caleb actually win the argument, 2 against 10. And so we go into this place and we start a civilization. And it goes pretty well. There's some ups and downs. You can read about them in the rest of the Tanakh. And eventually a tragedy happens. And we've got another migration, this one not by choice. We've got our temple, which had become the center of Jewish existence, destroyed. We have one of the most basic traumas in our history happen, and it leads us into a forced migration, an exile we called it, that sends us all around the world. And so this migration, nobody was happy to see it happen. But even this one brought with it some really incredible benefits. We had this tradition that was centralized and localized in one particular place. So that meant that anybody who was involved in it had to be, relatively close. But what we got with this shift to a universal religion that came as a result of the destruction of the temple was a tradition that was transportable. It was portable. It was movable all around the world. And we did so, by the way, by leaning precisely on that text that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi brought. It wasn't just the Torah, prophets, and writings that we brought with us in this universal kind of diaspora. It was also this set of laws and practices and some new holidays too that we found in the Talmud. our migrations continued. We eventually ended up migrating into America, and we got to the point that we've got 20th century songs about wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish. I mean, we laugh, but it's true. What do we do with that? Well, we look back at our 21st century migration. We look at this entry into the internet. And we try to wrestle with both the worries that the internet presents and the opportunities it can bring to the table. Because what we learned from our past migrations is even when there's danger, even when we're worried about giants, even when there's a trauma that leads to a migration, we overcome it. So I'm convinced we can overcome, a shift to Wi-Fi. What does the internet bring us? What do we actually get by entering into this migration? So let's start with what's most straightforward. We've got access to information. There's a lot of Jewish stuff on the internet. We've got hundreds and hundreds of hours of Jewish music. We've got Jewish podcasts. We've got Jewish videos all over the place. We have the ability, sitting on our couches at home, to access more Jewish wisdom than we could get at just about any library around. And we can get it mostly for free. That's new. We're lucky. But there's something else that the internet brings too. It's not just access to Jewish information. We get that. We call it the Information Superhighway. It doesn't surprise us that we can translate that to Judaism. But it also brings new forms of Jewish community. It's not our reflex to think about it that way yet, because it's new, and we actually talk about the internet as a distraction from community. We retreat into our smartphones. We get distracted by our emails when we could be connecting in person. It's true. But what are the new forms of community that the internet gives us an opportunity to gain? Well, let's think about somebody who is living in a small community. I was one of those people. I was living in Mississippi for a few years, and I actually had a nice Jewish life there. But I needed, on a regular basis, a feeling of global connection. I didn't have critical mass in my community that you might have in a Chicago, in a New York. And I found that in the internet. I think that there are so many people out there who feel othered, who feel marginalized, who, whether they're a Jew of color, whether they're queer, whether they're intermarried, there are all sorts of reasons you could feel separate from local Jewish institutions. And in the past, what would that mean? Well, you've got a few options. Grin and bear it, keep going, feel a little dissatisfied. 2, you could retreat into individual forms of Judaism, stay connected to Judaism, but, get some books, find a couple close friends, and lose the communal aspect. Or 3, ditch it all. Stop connecting to Judaism. People did that and do that. Today we have another possibility. People who don't feel connected to their in-person communities can and do find shared community online. There are Facebook group after Facebook group after Facebook group devoted specifically, precisely, to the kinds of Jewish people who need community and aren't finding it locally. But they are finding it in a community. That community just ends in .com or .org instead of avenue or road. That's the shift. That's what we're seeing today, and we can't underestimate how important it is. There is potential to feel fully transformed and live a fully thriving Jewish life online. And I want to give one snapshot into my own life to think about what that can look like. Let's flash back, not a few thousand years this time, but just a few months, to the holiday of Shavuot. It's my favorite one, actually. And it's my favorite because there's this tradition of staying up all night learning Jewish text. Fun, right? I mean, for me, it's fun. I'm a bit of a nerd, but I think it's a good one. And we decided, my girlfriend and I, that we were going to go to our local synagogue to do some Jewish learning on Shavuot. Problem: it ends. Because it's an event at a local synagogue. The events end. It doesn't end the internet. It's always there. So we went to our event. It ended at 10, did some great learning, and then we went home. And we hopped on the internet. Now, I'll grant you, that's forbidden traditionally. You're not supposed to use the internet on Shavuot, and I'm not here to convince anyone to discard that practice, but Rebbe Yehuda HaNassi broke with a pretty entrenched custom in his time, and for me today, connecting with Jewish learning online, even on Shavuot, has proven powerful. But so what did we do? We went online, and specifically we headed to this website called BIMBOM. And BIMBOM's cool because it has animated videos for every single Torah portion, 3 to 5 minutes. And what did we do? We learned the whole thing. In 5 hours, we started in Genesis, got through Deuteronomy. We engaged visually with these cool animated videos. We stopped, we talked about what it felt like to journey from Genesis, story of the Jewish family, into Exodus, into Leviticus and Numbers, wandering around, and we closed it out with Deuteronomy. And it was such a beautiful experience that as we walked out after 5 hours of this and the sun was rising, I realized this was the kind of event, the kind of experience I would want to replicate over and over again. This is the kind of experience I could envision building a Jewish life around and building a family around. And that's what I did. I got down on one knee and I proposed. And the funny thing is I didn't have the ring yet. At the beginning of the night, I didn't know I was going to propose. But this experience, this profoundly powerful connection that we built only because we had this digital Jewish option, made it so clear that there was nothing for me to do other than propose. So I did. But I want to mark something. I want to name something. BIMBOM did something important. They decided that they were going to shoot high. They were going to look to create a form of digital Jewish engagement that was more than just a half-hearted Facebook event to get 3 or 4 more people at my in-person gathering. It was going to be more than a committee meeting that our synagogue holds via video chat because we can't all make it to the building that day. They decided they were going to look to really create the kind of resource that could be transformative for people like Valerie and I. And they succeeded because it turns out when we try, we often do succeed. When we fully jump in with both feet to these Jewish migrations of the past and the present, we tend to do a pretty good job. So my charge for everybody today is that we do just that. We jump in with both feet. Because the addresses of Judaism today and moving forward end in .com and .org, just like they end in Road and Street. And I'm confident that if we jump in fully, we're going to do a pretty good job of crafting a Judaism that will transform us now and in the future. Thank you.